We're fearlessly talking about the biggest stories that matter to you the most. Breaking news, John Calipari is finalizing a 5-year deal to become the Arkansas Razorbacks' next head coach, covering college sports like no one else. The biggest guests in sports. We now welcome in Hall of Famer Jim Calhoun.
Such a pride I had, I came to Connecticut.
The legend, Tim Tebow, joins us.
We'll run it back. I like it.
The legend, Herschel Walker. Welcome in, everybody. Thursday afternoon edition, Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. Hope everybody is ready for what should be a fun end of the week episode of the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. So here's our rundown for today. It is pretty straightforward. Monday, we got ourselves a national championship game. Now, we'll talk championship game on Monday. I have a few other kind of 30,000-foot view kind of topics and conversations I want to get to. But today, it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to make my pick on the college football national championship game, Ohio State, Notre Dame, on Monday night. From there, we will do something a little bit different. I think Wednesday was a little bit of a quieter night in sports. Obviously, everybody's gearing up for the NFL playoffs. What I want to do, I'm going to go ahead and do a mailbag segment to end the Aaron Torres pod. I got some great questions on Indiana basketball's future, who could be their next head coach, my midseason Final Four and national championship picks and all that good stuff. Also, a great hypothetical from Kentucky. And oh, by the way, Purdue fans are back in the mentions and they are angrier than ever. So yeah, we got a fun show today. Again, national championship preview leading into our mailbag where we got a lot of great questions. By the way, producer Matt, monitor the chat for any great questions as well during the show that we could potentially use as we are live. With that said, before we get started, a couple quick reminders. One, make sure that you are subscribed to the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. From the YouTube perspective, new clips, new videos going up every single day. By the way, should mention really quick, if you are an advertiser or you know someone who you think would be interested in advertising, we reach hundreds of thousands of people every month, hundreds of thousands of people every week at this point, honestly. We are going to have some cool opportunities. There's going to be a new studio space soon, some screen space in the back of us. So feel free to hit me up, Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. But make sure that you are subscribed. Make sure also that you're subscribed on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Once again, a quick reminder, in addition to everything that we're doing, I do have an announcement, and I am working on something, and I appreciate everybody who has already supported, but we need even more support. And here's the deal. I've said it. I've told you. I do live in Southern California. Now, to be clear, it was a crazy couple days last week. I'm fortunate. I'm one of the lucky ones. My life has really not been impacted in any way, shape, or form. But there are a lot of others who are not so lucky. So I'm safe. My family's safe. My in-laws are safe down the street. But there's a lot of others that aren't so lucky. And it is not just people that have been impacted, but pets and animals as well. And the Aaron Torres Pod, Aaron Torres Media, we are working with the Pasadena Humane Society. Okay, so Pasadena Humane Society has taken in hundreds of animals over the last couple weeks. And a lot of them, it's not just food and water and shelter. A lot of them need very serious medical treatments after inhaling smoke. Unfortunately, there's obviously some animals that are dealing with some burn issues. And so Aaron Torres Media, we are partnering with the Pasadena Humane Society, and we would love for you to help in any way, shape, or form. First of all, we will put links in the YouTube chat. We'll put links in the show descriptions, both on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube as well. But the bottom line is pretty straightforward. If you can help, one, it is incredibly helpful and incredibly appreciated. Understand that from my perspective, 100% of the money, every single dollar that we raise is going directly to the animals. I don't get anything. The Humane Society isn't keeping anything other than to get the medical treatment and care that is needed for these animals in the California area. So one, all of the money goes directly to the animals. And then two, just as importantly, it is also worth noting as well that in addition to that, any dollar amount helps. Is that anything that you can give at this point? I know that money's tight. I hate asking for money, but it's not for me. It is for these animals. They need your help. Any amount helps. We've had some very, very, very generous people step up and help out. But if it's $1, if it's $5, if it's $10, don't feel like no dollar amount is too little. We appreciate everybody who has already chipped in. But by the way, if you can chip in even just a couple bucks, we would appreciate it. Again, the link is in the YouTube chat. The link will be in the show description. All of that. With that said, it is a Thursday afternoon into Friday. It's the end of the week. There is no more time to waste. This is a fun show. We talk sports. So let's go ahead and get to the topic of the day. Topic of the day. We got one college football game left, people. It is crazy to me. Listen, we're a show that we love college football. We're talking college football in February, March, April, May, June, July. But it's wild to me. I think we started the college football coverage really in July with over-under win total pods and YouTube videos, etc. And here we are down to one game, Ohio State versus Notre Dame, the 7 seed versus the 8 seed, Monday night in Atlanta. And how about this? Ohio State, after all the tumultuous things that they have gone through, they're an 8.5-point favorite in this game. The over-under is actually ticked up a bit to 46.5. So this game's going on Monday night. We'll talk about it a little bit on Sunday night's show as well. But I bring it up because let's go ahead and dive into this game. And I'm going to give you my official pick here on a Thursday night into Friday. So first off, let me even backtrack outside of this game. I am someone, I got to listen, sometimes in life, Torres has to take L's, okay? And I was somebody that I was not an advocate of expanding the playoff beyond 4. I just felt like, okay, whatever. We know most years that there's 1 to 2 teams that are significantly better than everybody else. And do we really need 12? Do we really need to let more teams into this postseason that can't compete for a championship? Well, one, I do think Ohio State and Notre Dame were excellent teams all year. But what this shows to me is that, first of all, in this portal NIL world, I think the days of the super team, of the Nick Saban, what they call the Death Star, where they're just I think those days are over. I don't think we're going to see teams steamroll the SEC 12-0 in the regular season. Even the Big Ten, Oregon was great. But listen, they easily could have lost to Ohio State. They easily could have lost to Penn State. So they weren't unbeatable or invincible. So I'm happy that we're at 12. I have enjoyed this playoff. I think it shows, by the way, this is now college football is a sport where you don't have to be great for 12 weeks out of the year. Notre Dame was not great early. Ohio State was not great as recently as the first week of December. But as long as you can get into this field, if you're playing your best football, that's all that matters. And these have been the 2 best teams since this postseason started. In terms of this game, in terms of these teams, we kind of know these teams. And by the way, we got plenty of college hoops in the mailbag coming up. So if you're tuning in for college hoops, we will get to that in just a minute. But, from the game perspective, I think, first of all, we've all watched these teams all season long, but certainly over the last couple of weeks, we know who these teams are. Notre Dame, they want to run the football. They don't even want to try to throw the football. Riley Leonard still has not thrown for over 250 yards in a single game in his Notre Dame career. How about this? Will Howard over 250 yards in every game in this playoff. So Notre Dame wants to run the ball. They're 99th in pass attempts, which I think is kind of significant, all things considered. And then with the defense, that defense is very opportunistic, very good at forcing the other team into mistakes. And we've seen that obviously at the most crucial times of this college football playoff. Notre Dame on the season, and I know they've played a couple extra games, so it makes things a little bit different. But in terms of total forced turnovers, they are number 1 in the country with 32 in 16 games or 15 games, excuse me. So we're talking about 2 a game that they have forced. By the way, total interceptions, 19 is the second most in all of college football behind only BYU and Texas. So they force you into a lot of turnovers. The run defense is not great. I think that's a little bit deceptive considering the fact that, let's remember, they played Army, they played Navy, they played a bunch of teams that just run the ball a lot. But Penn State, it is worth noting, was able to run the football on them when they played just a week ago. Ohio State, listen, I know I said there was no more Death Stars in college football, but at least for the last 3 weeks, Ohio State has looked like the team that we all thought they would in August, September, etc. By the way, don't want to do the Ryan Day side tangent, but I'll just be quick on this. for anybody that's coming out and, oh, well, this proves that anyone thought that Ryan Day should lose his job, you're an idiot. No, I actually think it's the exact opposite. I think this kind of proves that we were right, that we were holding Ohio State to a very high standard that they were not meeting through 12 weeks of the regular season. Well, they got in the playoff. They've gotten hot. They're playing their best football. And I don't really know what there is to add about Ohio State that isn't already said. They're basically top 5 in the country in every defensive category. Offensively, we know what they have done differently over the last couple games. They're actually, oh my goodness, this crazy thing called throwing the ball to their best players. And I think what was interesting about the Texas game was even when Texas clearly made it a priority to take Jeremiah Smith out of that game, guess what ended up happening? Carnell Tate had a big game. Emeka Ibuka had a big game. G. Scott had a big game. And all of a sudden you realize, oh my goodness, they have so many weapons. Why did they not use these people all year? The run game was not great against Texas, but I think that's more of a byproduct of Texas just has so many dudes on defense, or at least they did before their season ended. And that was one of the reasons I love the under in that Ohio State-Texas game, because I just said this Texas defense is being underappreciated, discussed going into that game. But Ohio State wins, not surprising. The big Jack Sawyer play is the difference. So let's go ahead and get to this game. Let's go ahead and get to my pick, and I'll be pretty straightforward. Listen, I think there's a difference between the emotional side of things and the realistic side of things. I think Ohio State wins this game, and I think they actually cover the 8.5. And let me explain why. Okay, so when I say the emotional versus the realistic, the emotional is, let me be the millionth sports analyst in America to say, like, wow, shout out Marcus Freeman. Made Notre Dame kind of likable. Never thought we'd live in that world, yet here we are. So listen, I think there's a lot of people weirdly that are rooting for Notre Dame in this game. Marcus Freeman is certainly a likable guy. The team plays hard for him. But I also think there are certain things that are not in Notre Dame's favor. And I think there are matchup issues. And I think realistically, Notre Dame's the more banged up team coming into this game. And when I think about this matchup, I really think about all of the conversations that we had in the summer about the 12-team college football playoff and what it would look like. And one of the conversations we kept coming back to was it was going to be a war of attrition. Who are the teams that could withstand injuries? Because now, remember, even last year, you're playing 15 games maximum. Now you could be playing up to 17, which is what Ohio State is playing. Notre Dame playing 16. I take that back. They both played 16 because neither played in the Big Ten championship or in a conference championship. So they're both in game 16. And the first reason I like Ohio State is because it feels like they somehow withstood their injuries early, specifically on the O-line. Josh Simmons, the offensive tackle, goes down in the Oregon game back in October. But it doesn't feel like they've had those big crippling injuries as the playoff has gone on and as the competition is ramped up. Notre Dame's not the same. Think about just Notre Dame. Let's just talk about big picture, their best players. Their best corner, Benjamin Morrison, goes out, about 4 or 5 weeks ago before the playoff even started. Has not played a down in these playoffs. Riley Mills, their best defensive lineman, goes down in the Indiana game in round 1, has not played since Georgia. Who else? The offensive tackle, the starting offensive tackle will not play in this game because of injury. Riley Leonard was in and out of concussion protocol, even though he obviously came out of it in that Penn State game. And Jeremiah Love, we saw it. He's awesome, but he was playing in that big, bulky knee brace, and they are clearly not 100%. So there's that element of it. But then there's the other element of, I think it's a bad matchup for Notre Dame based on how they want to play and what they want to do. The bottom line is, listen, this is going to sound negative, and I hate saying stuff like this because it seems mean-spirited. It seems as though I'm trying to be negative. But can we call a spade a spade? They were kind of lucky to win that Penn State game, right? And I know you could say the same about Ohio State. Ohio State had the strip and score. Ohio State was up when the strip and score happened. Ohio State just sealed the game with the strip and score. It was 4th down. If Texas doesn't score, that game is over, whether the strip and score, I know I keep saying that, happened or not. Notre Dame, it's not the same. Penn State ran the football right at Notre Dame, okay? And again, I don't want to discredit Notre Dame putting up 24 second half points, putting up 17 points in the fourth quarter, but let's just go back. Penn State was running the ball on Notre Dame the entire game. They get the ball back, could easily go to overtime where they could run the ball in overtime, and instead they decide, hey, let's let Drew Aller cook which is something that none of us, listen, no disrespect. Greg McElroy and Sean McDonough were like, oh, you got to let him loose. I'm like, why? Doesn't make sense. Drew Aller's been kind of up and down. He was completing like 54% of his passes in the college football playoff. Sit on the ball, go to overtime, try to win it there. Instead, they think Drew Aller is apparently Josh Allen, and they try to let him throw the football all over the field. And to me, it never made sense. He throws the big pick, sets up the field goal, and Notre Dame is playing for a championship. So this is not a knock on Notre Dame. This isn't rooting against them. It is just the reality that this is the best team they've faced. I think the circumstances set up nicely for them. And I just think it's a bad matchup for a Notre Dame team, which continues to be banged up. Final score prediction. Ohio State, I'll say 24, Notre Dame 10. I think Ohio State is your national champion. By the way, I will add this. If there is one way that Notre Dame does win this game, I think that it has to be forcing turnovers. And I will say, Will Howard's been known to throw a pick or two at the worst possible time, so maybe it's in play. Let me put it this way. The only way that I believe that Notre Dame wins, I believe they have to force a minimum of 2, probably 3 turnovers, and I believe they have to get points directly from those turnovers. So maybe a pick 6, maybe something like that. But I still think Ohio State's going to win. But the pathway for Notre Dame to win, and by the way, Notre Dame fans, throw this in my face if I'm wrong, but I think the pathway for Notre Dame to win, the only way to do it, they have to force a minimum of 2 turnovers, at least 1 pick 6 or fumble recovery for a touchdown. I just don't think it's going to happen. All right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we got some great questions in our College Hoops mailbag. We will get to those. By the way, if you have any good questions, drop them in the chat. We will either use them today or maybe in a future mailbag episode. Quick break. We will answer some very fun questions when we come back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute, but before we do, many of you ask me all the time, Torres, what can I do to help support the show? You give me hours and hours and hours of content every single week. What can I do to help you? Well, I'll tell you what, do me a quick favor. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merchandise store for all of your team-specific shirts, hats, and more, all available at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. A lot of you wondering, Torres, what can I get in that merch store? Well, first of all, we got our brand new Hope and Pope Kentucky basketball t-shirts. That's right. Mark Pope has arrived. He is here to save the day. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirts there. Also, Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is here. You can get your tees there. Basketball School Alabama shirts. Mora Hurley 2024 UConn shirts for your tailgates at Rentschler Field, your games at the XL Center or Gamble. And oh, by the way, your Mike effing Woodson gear for Indiana. If you love football, we got you covered too. We got more Dion shirts and hats than we even know what to do with. The freeze warning has hit the plains. Auburn fans, grab your freeze warning tees now. And of course, our new era, new rules shirt applies to Nebraska football and its incredible fan base. We have more coming for the fall, plenty in stock right now. So make sure to check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And you can always hit me up with any questions. Aaron Torres Podcast. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. So first of all, a little bit of a quiet chat today. Let's get going, people. We got ourselves a mailbag to get to. Drop your questions, your comments. There's a couple good ones already in there. We will be sure to grab them here in real time as we react to a lot of different things from the world of college sports and really college basketball specifically. But I had you send in some questions. Think there were some really good ones. So let's go ahead and dive in. Producer Matt, what is my first question? Laren in Kentucky says, Torres, who's your national coach of the year at this point in the season? Well, I'll tell you what, Laren, no disrespect because I love you. Laren's been a long-time listener to this show. Rather than talking coach of the year, let's talk big picture. Let's talk my mid-season Final Four. Because in my opinion, one, that's an interesting topic. But two, and it's not to say that national coach of the year is not interesting. But two, also, this is kind of the right time to do it, right? Because when we're looking at the basketball calendar, it's worth noting that we are now basically at the halfway point of the college basketball season because most teams, here's the thing, most teams have played about 16, 17 games, okay? Well, guess what? on a season in college basketball, you play 31 regular season games. If you get to your conference championship game, you usually play about 34 games going into the NCAA tournament. So if you played 17 games so far, that's right around the halfway point. So let's get to Torres's midseason Final Four in college hoops. The first team in my midseason Final Four, it is producer Matt's Auburn Tigers. Okay, so Auburn. Let's talk Auburn, because I know what people are going to say. Oh, Torres, they just lost Janai Broome. They stink. How are they ever going to be good without a blah, 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 this and that? Well, first, I don't really care about the injury. Let me explain why. One, we saw them against Mississippi State. They destroyed Mississippi State the other night, and that game was at home. Now, I know what you would say. Well, it's a good team, but they were at home. What happens when they go on the road? Well, what I think about with Auburn is pretty straightforward. Is yes, you never want to lose a McDonald's, an All-American National Player of the Year type candidate. But at the same time, first off, Auburn, I believe, is as good as anybody at it. They're in as good a position as anybody to withstand that kind of injury. They're really deep. They play a lot of guys. They're probably the only team in college basketball with a fifth-year senior at center in Dylan Cardwell that, credit to Bruce Pearl for keeping that kid in the program. Because that's a kid that in a lot of other places would have transferred, wouldn't have stuck around. He has been with the Auburn Tigers for 5 years. So how many schools have a fifth-year center that's been in their program as the backup? Well, now he's getting starters minutes, and I think he's going to be fine. The other thing that Auburn has going for it, and it seems kind of crazy to me, is the schedule actually breaks pretty nicely for them, especially in this loaded SEC. We talked about it the other day. But let's say Janai Broome is out till February 1st, okay? That doesn't seem – he could be back sooner. He certainly could be back later. But it's January 16th as I record. They have a grand total of 3 games between now and February 1st. So look at the schedule, okay? They play at Georgia this weekend. Georgia's good. I'm still a little bit of a seller. They got destroyed on the road at Tennessee the other night, okay? I'm a little bit of a seller on Georgia, but whatever. We'll see what happens there. Then, and this is just a fortuitous break, they get a full week off before they return next Saturday. So this coming Saturday is what, the 18th or the 19th, something like that. So let me do some quick math here. It's the 18th, okay? They don't play again until the following Saturday against Tennessee, and then they have LSU on the road. And so basically, let me put it this way. Over a 3-week stretch, they have a game this weekend, then a full week off, then Tennessee at home, then at LSU. That is all they have left between now and February 1st. And so everything kind of lines up nicely for Janai Broome to come back around February 1st, not really miss much time, and Auburn potentially to go 3-0, maybe 2-1, but I just don't see this big drop-off. And the other thing with Auburn really quick, their resume is so good that they can afford a loss or two without Janai Broome, maybe 2 or 3 really, and it's not going to impact them as a seed. It's not going to impact them falling down the bracket projections. Look at this. How about this? This is a crazy stat. Auburn has 9 quad 1 wins right now. 9 quad 1 wins. That is by far the most in the country. Unless I miss something, no one else has more than 5 in America. So you look at Auburn's resume, only team to beat Iowa State, beat Houston on a neutral, beat Memphis on a neutral, beat North Carolina on a neutral, beat Purdue on a neutral, beat Ohio State on a neutral, beat Mississippi State at home, beat Texas on the road. Those are all quad 1 wins, and they're all going to carry weight throughout the season. So I'm not worried about Auburn. They are definitively in my too early midseason Final Four. They are the first team. Second team in my midseason Final Four. The team that Auburn beat that has not taken a loss since, the Iowa State Cyclones. So we did not talk Iowa State, Kansas. They played on Wednesday. Iowa State, I kind of felt like toyed with them. And I thought Bill Self had kind of an incredible quote after that game that kind of summed up that game in terms of what Iowa State does to you. Let me see if I can find this quote, because it is an unbelievable quote. Let's see here. This is the entire thing. Let's see here. Oh, that's behind a paywall. Basically, he said something to the effect of, there's a difference between wanting it and doing it. And he's like, those guys do it. We just say we want it. We're not tough enough. Basically, that's what he said. I mean, I could find the quote, but it doesn't really matter. But you look at Iowa State. Only loss is to Auburn. That was a game, by the way. They had an 18-point lead at Auburn. But I also love this team, love the way they're put together. Remember, they bring back a lot of pieces from a team that made the elite or the Sweet 16 a year ago. They lost to Illinois in the Sweet 16. And they won the Big 12 conference tournament. And on top of all of the returnees, they just did some really smart stuff in the portal. They don't go after the biggest names in the portal. They make sure guys fit. And if you watch them, this Joshua Jefferson kid that they got from St. Mary's, now I thought he was a little bit better than he was given credit for. I didn't think he was going to be this good. 12 points, 8 boards per game. Against Kansas, had 10 points, 12 boards, 3 assists. I mean, he was basically playing point forward. Kansas had no answer for him. And so you have Joshua Jefferson. The Deshaun Jackson kid down low is really good. I know that they just suffered an injury, but this team is so talented. The three-headed monster of Curtis Jones, Keyshawn Gilbert, and also Tamin Lipsey on the perimeter are phenomenal. But I think Josh Jefferson is the difference between this year and last year. I have Iowa State also in my Final Four. Let's keep it going. My third team in the Final Four. This is where it starts to get a little interesting. A team that if you listen to this show, Torres has been gushing about this team. The Illinois Fighting Illini. So Torres just can't get enough of Illinois. And Illinois, I will say this, is I generally tend to like veteran teams that have been around, that have done it before. Illinois is the exact opposite. If you watch Illinois, you know that basically Illinois, it's kind of crazy. Their top 3 players are essentially freshmen in class. Kasparas Yakashonis, their point guard, Will Riley, and then Tomislav Ivicic, which is obviously Big Z's brother, is technically a 21-year-old first-year college player. He's listed as a sophomore. But I love this team, and I'll say this. When they're healthy, they basically destroy everybody, okay? 25-point win at Indiana the other day, which is basically going to cost Mike Woodson his job. What was it, a 35-point win at Oregon? I know what people say, oh, they just lost to USC. Yeah, they didn't have their starting point guard. What do you want from me? Stop. Every time I say anything nice about Illinois, well, they just lost to USC. First of all, shout out to Musbus. He's turning things around there. They beat Iowa the other day too. But it's also, a lot of teams will lose when your most important player is out, who is also a lottery pick. It's going to happen. It's okay. But over the last probably 6 weeks, this team's only losses, Tennessee at the buzzer and USC without their most important player. When they have their full lineup, they are destroying everybody. I don't know if they're going to win the Big Ten because the Big Ten is so weird. 18 teams, such an imbalanced schedule. Not everybody plays everybody twice, let alone barely everybody once. And so, like, as an example, they already played Wisconsin, got that win, but then there's some other, the point I'm trying to make, I don't know if they're going to win the Big Ten. Michigan State 6-0, Michigan's 5-0. They already have 2 losses. One of them came very early in the season. The other one was USC the other day. But to me, they're the best team in the Big Ten. They have the highest upside in the Big Ten. And this kid, Yakashonis, I keep telling you, this kid is, I think he's going to be a top 3 pick. Mark it down, January 16th. Everybody's talking about Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey at Rutgers. I think Yakashonis goes top 3. Illinois is my third Final Four team. Finally, my fourth Final Four, midseason Final Four team. Surprise, maybe, out of the SEC. Out of the SEC, where am I going to go? Could go with about 8 different teams here. I'm going to go with the Florida Gators. And I know what everyone's going to say. Oh, Torres, Florida just lost to Missouri. Do you not watch the games? Yeah, I watch the games. Everybody in the SEC is going to take losses at various points. It's going to happen. It's okay. But I love this team. And I think, in my opinion, they fit the profile of a lot of teams that traditionally make Final Four runs. Veteran team. I know I said Illinois is really young. I think Florida's the opposite. Veteran team. A lot of those guys have played in multiple NCAA tournaments. Walter Clayton played in an NCAA tournament at Iona, transferred to Florida, played last year. Elijah Martin, 2 NCAA tournaments, including a Final Four at Florida Atlantic. By the way, I'm wearing my 2023 Final Four shirt with the Florida Atlantic logo on there. So shout out to Florida Atlantic. He was in a Final Four at Florida Atlantic. All those guys on Florida played in the NCAA tournament last year. Veteran guards. And the thing I keep going back to, I keep saying it, they are a good defensive team, very good defensive team, and they're a great rebounding team. And what's funny is when you watch them come in the gym, they kind of got these tall, skinny guys that look like they want to hang out on the perimeter, Thomas Hawk and Alex Condon. And then you watch them play, and they're bangers. They go down low, they throw elbows, they get boards. Like, the reason that they beat Arkansas was they just kept getting second and third chances every single possession, and that's basically what they do to everybody. Should give a shout out to Ruben Chinyelu as well, because to me, I thought he was one of the more underrated gets in the portal. He's kind of that bulky guy down low. So when I look at Florida, I just look at the veteran guards, the three-point shooting, the defense, the rebounding, the second chance points. That is my official mid-season Final Four. Auburn, Iowa State, Florida, Illinois. A couple teams that just missed the cut. Duke. Listen, Duke's really good. Duke is really good. I do wonder if a little bit of Duke's stature is being, overhyped. Is that the right word? By the fact that, the ACC is really bad. Like, you could say that doesn't play a role, but let's call a spade here. Duke, of their two biggest games outside of Cameron Indoor. Now, they did beat Auburn. That is a great win. Not trying to take it away from them. Lost to Kansas on a neutral, lost to Kentucky on a neutral. So I'm not saying that they're bad. They're very, very, very good. They're a very talented team. Cooper Flagg is probably going to win National Player of the Year, depending on how long Jani Broome is out. I just worry big picture. So many young guys, and I know they have veterans, this and that, but it's going to come down to Cooper Flagg, Malawach, Con Knipple, especially on the offensive end of the court. And so I look at that Duke team. I worry a little bit. Kentucky, I'm about 2 weeks away from Kentucky being in this conversation. I need to see them consistently play with the defensive effort that they have over the last couple games. So I would put them in the mix as well. Producer Matt, I didn't give you this one, but I would put Alabama right on the cusp. I know that they just lost the other day. I'm not as worried as everybody else. They still have great guard play, shoot the ball well. They're really big. I think that's the thing that stands out. They walk in the gym. They are so big with Omayori, Grant Nelson, Jaron Stevenson, Darian Reed, on and on. So I would have Alabama right on the cusp. I'll be honest, I kind of forget some of the other teams that I gave you, but Duke, Kentucky, Alabama. I'd put Tennessee on the cusp. I don't know if they have enough offense. Houston's probably on the cusp. I still think UConn, I'm not sold on UConn, especially without Liam McNeely. Marquette's probably a team that should be in the conversation as well. But those are my final four in the midseason of Auburn, Iowa State, Florida, and Illinois. Shout out producer Matt for getting everything up. All right, let's switch gears. Let's get to another question. By the way, Matt, after this next question, we'll do a quick Collie Puffs read, okay? So we'll go to Collie Puffs in a minute, but let's get to the next question in the mailbag today. This is from Hooperazzi on Twitter, who is an Indiana fan, and he asked me, he says, who is going to be the next basketball coach at Indiana? It's the $1 million question right now. It's maybe the $8 million question right now because that's what Mike Woodson's current buyout is. And I think about Indiana, first of all, as you can see on the bottom of the screen, make sure to follow our Torres on Indiana account, Torres on Indiana. By the way, if we have any Indiana students see this video, we need some social media help. If you want an internship opportunity, you can email me, Aaron Torres, podcastquestions@gmail.com. With that said, let's talk Indiana. Hooperazzi, who is the next basketball coach in Indiana? So first off, I'll say this. I was a little surprised how hard the national media went at Mike Woodson after the game on Tuesday. Usually I'm the guy that's out on a limb saying stuff that's unpopular. Shout out Zach Edey a year ago when I was 4 months ahead of that narrative. But I bring it up because Indiana, it felt like the second that they lost in the manner that they did. By the way, I got an itch in my nose here. I apologize. It's allergy season, so I apologize. Okay, Indiana. Focus on Indiana. Focus on Indiana, Torres. Pay attention. Okay. So I was surprised at how many people on the national scale really went after Woodson and basically said, this is it. Now, I happen to agree, but to me, it was a little bit surprising. Usually people are hesitant to kind of have strong opinions, hesitant to burn sources, hesitant to do this. And everybody was just like, no, he's done. He ain't coming back. And so the question becomes, who's next? Now, first of all, money's not going to be an issue. So I looked into Woodson's buyout. He does have an $8 million buyout. It can be paid out $1 million a year over 8 years if what I read was correct. So basically they're paying him $1 million a year. That's a retirement nest egg. He's going to be fine, but they also don't have to break the bank. This isn't like you got to spend $20 million to buy him out. And then where do you get the money for everything else? So they're going to be able to pay the buyout. It's going to happen. And I think the big question that becomes clear to me is basically like, can you get a big name at another school to leave a big job to take your job? And I've said this for years. I think we are increasingly getting to a point where it's harder and harder to get big names to leave big jobs for other big jobs, even blue blood type jobs. If you believe Indiana is a blue blood, that's a whole nother conversation. Okay. You look at Kentucky last year. They called Scott Drew. Scott Drew listened, didn't leave. Dan Hurley didn't even pick up the phone call from Kentucky. Go back a few years ago. Arizona is one of the best jobs in college basketball. They hired an assistant off Gonzaga and Tommy Lloyd. He's been great, but it's not easy to get guys out of good jobs for other jobs. But I don't think that means that you shouldn't make phone calls. And I don't think that means that Indiana is incapable of getting a big name coach. Want to get to a few of them. The first one, producer Matt, I did not give you, but somebody brought this up, and I think it's a great point. Dusty May was the hot candidate a year ago. He was at Florida Atlantic, and everybody knew last year was the year he was probably leaving for a big-time job. Well, I bring it up because even a year ago, Indiana fans wanted the school to fire Mike Woodson to go get Dusty May, and they basically said, like, look, if you have a chance to go get an Indiana alum, for people who don't remember, we talked about it on the show on Wednesday. Dusty May is an Indiana alum, was not an assistant, but he was a student manager under Bobby Knight. He has ties to the school. And so everybody said a year ago, it's like, oh, you got to go get Dusty May. They don't. He goes to Michigan. Now, to be clear, I don't think he's leaving Michigan after 1 year, but I've had a lot of Indiana fans bring up the fact to me that his buyout is actually pretty low and pretty manageable. And so if he wants the Indiana job, if he's willing to leave after 1 year, he is actually a relatively attainable candidate. By the way, for people who don't follow college basketball or Big Ten basketball on a day-to-day basis, it is worth noting, by the way, Michigan is awesome this year. Michigan is currently 5-0 in the Big Ten. They do play on Thursday night at Minnesota. So by the time you see this, maybe they took a loss. I don't think that they will, but there's a possibility to take the loss. But 13-3 right now, 5-0 in the Big Ten. They're playing really well. And all of a sudden, he is not unattainable just because of the fact that that buyout is relatively manageable. So that's probably the first call. Now, would he take it? Would he leave Michigan after 1 year? The big narrative at this time last year was that he really didn't want one of those fishbowl jobs where, basketball is the focus 365 days a year. One, maybe it's different because it's Indiana, his alma mater. Two, kind of worth noting, Indiana's kind of good at football right now, so maybe you don't have as much of a spotlight as you expected. That's the first phone call I think you have to make. I don't know if he would leave. Two, I think the other phone call you have to make, will it happen? Probably not. I think you got to at least call Bruce Pearl, right? And this might sound crazy. People sit there and say, well, why would Bruce Pearl leave Auburn? Well, just remember, Bruce Pearl, first head coaching job was at Southern Indiana. He was an assistant at Iowa. He has actually spent a fair amount of time in Big Ten country, also coached at UW Milwaukee. Now, with that said, do I think he's leaving Auburn? I don't. First off, we got to remember, like I just said, I think Auburn's going to the Final Four at minimum. I think they're playing until the last week in March, the first week in April, okay? And Indiana cannot wait that long to get a head coach with the portal the way that it is. I know the portal opens a little bit later this year. It does not matter. You cannot wait until April 8th to hire a coach. And that's assuming that you can get Bruce Pearl, and I don't think you can. Bruce Pearl is 60, but he's going to be 65 years old. I don't think he's leaving. I don't think that, if he's coming off of a Final Four or national championship, there's no way Auburn lets him leave. And I think he's retiring at Auburn at this point. Now, listen, I know there's some talk about Auburn hasn't allowed him to make his son the coach in waiting. I promise you, if they're about to lose Bruce Pearl, they're going to figure out a way to make that happen, make a way to get it done. So I love Bruce Pearl. I think you should call Bruce Pearl. I don't think he would take it. Next name that I would absolutely call. Would he take it? I don't know. And I don't know that they will because of some background stuff. I would call Chris Beard. And it's kind of crazy because I was thinking about this. One of the first months that this YouTube channel blew up was March and April of 2021. And that was the last time that the Indiana coaching job opened up. Now, it's not technically opened up yet, but it's going to open up. And even at the time, you can find videos of me saying, go get Chris Beard, stop screwing around, okay? Now, things have changed. Chris Beard, of course, went through that legal situation at Texas. It is worth noting that all charges were dropped, but I know that he might not be the cup of tea for everybody that everybody's looking for. But at the end of the day, if you're an Indiana fan, don't you just want to win? Aren't you just tired of getting your brains beat in? And credit Chris Beard, man, the guy wins everywhere. He won at Texas Tech, went to a Final Four. I think it's easy to forget this now. The year he got fired at Texas, they were number one in the country. Like, they were the number one team in the country. Last year at Ole Miss struggled a little bit, but we've talked about it on the show. He brought back Mark Adams, his kind of defensive guru. Now they're again one of the best defensive teams in the country. And I think the other variable with Chris Beard, one, he's coached all over the country. You know, you kind of think of him as a Texas guy, but he was a JUCO guy in the Midwest, coached in Texas, coached now in Mississippi. The other thing is, I think he's going to take it. Like, Bruce Pearl, I think, is retiring at Auburn. Dusty May, I don't really think he's going to leave. Chris Beard, I think, is about ready. I don't say about ready. I think he would leave for the right opportunity. I think, I'll tell you this, don't tell anybody. I think he was ready to take the Arkansas job last year, and I think Hunter Yurachek kind of dropped the bag. And so I don't think he's a lifer at Ole Miss. That's a really tough job in the SEC with the current state of things that it is. That's not one of the best jobs in the SEC. He's doing a great job, but it's not an easy job to win at. I think he would take Indiana if they really went after him. That's a name that I would consider. Another name I would consider, certainly got a little bit of baggage right now, Florida coach Todd Golden. So Todd Golden, a young guy, 39 years old. He's at Florida. Now, it is worth noting, he is going through it's more of a school investigation. I wouldn't necessarily call it a legal situation right now, but he's going through a school investigation right now. I think it's certainly possible that he is unhireable. But the counter to that is, as I've said from the beginning, I'm not saying listen, I don't have any inside information. I don't believe Florida would be dumb enough to let him be coaching right now if they truly believed that everything that had been said about him was 100% accurate. And so he is coaching. The team is awesome. And a couple things worth noting. One, they're going to lose a bunch of guys off this year's team after this season. Elijah Martin's in his last year. Walter Clayton's in his last year. Two, he's really good. Like, I've said it a million times, is I didn't like the hire when it happened. I got to take the L. I love kind of, he has the analytics side to him, but he's got the recruiting chops and he's raised NIL money. And he's going to the SEC and he's competing in the deep end with the big fish, okay? He ain't backing down from Rick Barnes, who he just beat. He ain't backing down from John Calipari, who he just beat. And so you think about him. The other thing, remember, he's got ties everywhere as well. He's not just I'm a Southeast guy. You look at, started his career, he's from Arizona, played at St. Mary's, coached at San Francisco, coached at Auburn. Now he's at Florida. So he has ties all over. I don't think he's tied to Florida for the rest of his career. And the one thing I think will be kind of worth tracking over the next couple years, some of these SEC coaches, the SEC is such a gauntlet right now. Do some guys try to get out of the SEC to maybe the ACC, the Big Ten, because it's just so hard to win right now? And I'm not saying people are soft or people are afraid. I'm not saying this is a Lincoln Riley situation when Oklahoma was leaving for the SEC. But I just wonder, like, if you got a chance to take one of the 2 or 3 best jobs in the Big Ten, or you're in the middle to the bottom of the SEC with the way the SEC is going, with the fact that Auburn's rolling and Kentucky's rolling with Pope and whatever, I think you have to at least consider it. Which brings me to another name that I think is at least worth making a phone call to, Chris Jans at Mississippi State. Listen, Mississippi State's one of those, that's got to be one of the 2 or 3 toughest jobs in the SEC. I know everybody's got NIL money in the SEC, but probably not quite the same at Mississippi State as most other places. And I think he's doing about as well as you can. They're currently in the top 15, sitting at 14-3. They have lost 2 straight, to Kentucky at home, at Auburn. And I think that kind of shows you kind of the cap of what you're really capable of at Mississippi State. I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm not trying to be mean-spirited. It is a tough place to win. And it's a tough place to sustain winning in this era where everybody in the SEC has money. Everybody is winning at a high level. It's just a really tough situation. So I would go ahead and give him a call. I would see what he's interested in. By the way, he has Big Ten area ties as well. Coached at Bowling Green for 1 year. Now, like so many other guys on this list, he's got checkered past is not really so much of it, but you can Google why he had to leave Bowling Green or why he was excused from Bowling Green, if you will. But I just bring it up because he does have ties to the Midwest. He had success there, won at New Mexico State. Now he's winning at Mississippi State. I think it'd be crazy if you didn't give him a phone call, assuming that you don't hit on one of the other ones. Really quickly, I think realistically, we have to be honest and say that, again, high-profile coaches in high-profile leagues are not really leaving even good jobs for potentially great jobs like Indiana. So you start to look at the mid-major ranks. The other guy that immediately comes to mind, and I think it's one that I think even Indiana fans are kind of like, this might be the guy that ends up making the most sense. But Ben McCollum, who is the head coach currently at Drake. Okay, yeah, let's do the old cliche Drake joke. Started from the bottom, now he's at Indiana, baby. But let me explain why. This is a guy. This is kind of a crazy stat. He's a young guy, by the way. He's 43 years old. He'll be 44 in April. He won 4 national championships at the D2 level, was kind of picky on when am I going to go up to D1, this, that, the other thing. Well, he goes to Drake this year. In year 1, he's 15-2. He basically took a bunch of D2 guys with him, and all he's done is won. Beat Miami, beat Vandy, by the way. Vandy's a good team. Beat Kansas State early in the out-of-conference portion of the slate. Now he is currently sitting in first place in the Missouri Valley. So listen, people have been waiting for this guy to come to the D1 level. He is there. He is having success. That is a name that, listen, I would go after the Bruce Pearls, the Chris Beards, but if they say no, I wouldn't hesitate to jump on this guy because he's going to be at the high major level here soon. I think he's probably a name worth calling. All right, so that's my Indiana list. Let's by the way, I don't know if there's any comments about potential Indiana head coaches. Let me just take a look real quick. Jans is a Big Ten coach. I agree with that. Beard got to be the guy. On and on and on. Somebody asked, what's Woodson's buyout? As I said, unless I misread it, I believe Mike Woodson's buyout is $8 million, but it can be paid out over 8 years. So $1 million a year in the modern era of college sports, that's nothing. That's not, I mean, they just made what, 6-7 million just from making the college football playoff. That's a rounding error in the Big Ten. Now, if this was the Mountain West, if this was the Sun Belt, that's a different conversation. It ain't the Sun Belt, it's the Big Ten. I think Woodson's gone. It's just a matter of who replaces him. Producer Matt, let's get to the next question. I need some water, and I am so okay. It's a great question. This actually came in a few weeks ago. By the way, we forgot to do Collie Puffs, but that's okay. We'll stick with this for now. That's on Torres. After this one, this is what we're going to do, Producer Matt. After this one. All right. This is great. Ed is a rabid listener of the show, originally from Kentucky. I believe he was maybe even in Indiana as well. He sent this to me a few weeks ago. He said, "Hey, AT, huge fan of the show. I seem to remember arguing last year that it wasn't crazy for Reed Sheppard to consider coming back to Kentucky for a sophomore year because of NIL. Considering he's basically a G League guy right now, was it a mistake? And I assume that means for him to go pro. And how damn good would he be in Mark Pope's offense?" What a question. This is a great question. Let's go ahead and dive in. And first of all, Ed, yes, by the way, full coverage, Torres on UK for you Kentucky fans. Make sure you're following Torres on UK on Twitter. But for people who have maybe found me over the last couple months, so once again, Torres was out on an island when it came to this conversation and to this question. And so Reed Sheppard's blowing up last year. And all the people that love college, that love the NBA, that love the NFL, that think that college sports is dumb and it's a waste of time. Oh, you got to go pro. You should never come back. It's like, well, look at Carson Beck. Look at what Carson Beck's doing right now. He's making more money as a college player than he would as a pro. Now, Reed Sheppard was a little bit different. He was obviously going to be a top 10 pick. He ends up going number 3 overall, I believe, to the Houston Rockets. But what I said last year, and I still stand by it, and by the way, I have no ill will that he left. Make the decision that you want, that you think is best for you. All I said a year ago was I don't think it's crazy that he should consider coming back. And I know what the NBA people say. He's got a 4-year guaranteed $25 million contract sitting there. Okay, I get that. One, what I will say, he was going to make a crap ton of money playing college basketball this year, okay? First of all, the collective would have clearly taken care of him. But two, if you remember last year, Reed Sheppard's face was on everything in the state of Kentucky, okay? I mean, it was on pizza boxes. It was on a dairy farm. Pretty sure, there's a Kentucky Derby horse with his face, cut into the side of the horse. And, they cut a haircut with Reed Sheppard's face. The kid's face was everywhere. And so there's no way to know this. But and by the way, here's the other thing. Was a freshman All-American playing at Kentucky. I guarantee that's when you start to get the national deals. That's when you start to get the Beats by Dre and the things like that. There's no way to know. But I feel confident saying that if Reed Sheppard had come back to Kentucky, he would have probably made somewhere north of $5 million. I don't think that's hyperbole, and it wouldn't have just come from Kentucky. It's what we said about AJ DeBansa a few weeks ago. People are like, oh, he's going to make $7 million from BYU. No, he might make $7 million, but he's got to deal with Red Bull. He's got to deal with Nike. And those are the kinds of deals you can get as the face of Kentucky basketball, especially when your dad won a national championship and especially under a coach that played with your dad. And so I always thought it should be at least a consideration. It wasn't, but I thought it should have been a consideration. With that said, he did go pro, and he's having rookie struggles. And what's different about Reed is he's in the unique situation where he got drafted by a team that was really bad last year, but is actually pretty good this year. And I don't really follow the NBA. I don't like, it's not, whatever. I don't want to be hypocritical here, but I just, the NBA just does not interest me very much. But the Houston Rockets are currently in second place in the Western Conference. And because they're playing really well, because they brought in some vets, because some of their younger guys like Jalen Green are starting to play at a really high level, there's just not a lot of opportunity for Reed Sheppard to grow. A lot of times you get drafted by a bad team, you got to play right away because they got nobody else. That's not the Houston Rockets. And so he spent a bunch of time in the G League. He did come up, but he's not playing. And so I never thought it was crazy that he should come back. He is not playing in the professional ranks, at least not at the NBA level. But here's the fun hypothetical. Could you imagine this kid playing at Kentucky with the current team in Mark Pope's system? Because last year, it was insane. I went back and looked it up. He averaged about 13 points per game. Let me pull up the numbers exactly. 13 points per game, about 4.5 rebounds, 4.5 assists, and 54% shooting from the three-point line. Now, part of it was the offense was actually functional last year because they had John Welsh as they called him the offensive coordinator or whatever. But 12.5 points, 4 rebounds, 4.5 assists, and 52% from the three-point line. That was as a true freshman in maybe the toughest conference in college basketball. Now he comes back. And I think a couple things. One, he fits perfectly into the Mark Pope system. Imagine he shot 52% last year in that old system when he was also sort of the de facto point guard. DJ Wagner was out with injuries at various times. Rob Dillingham was more off the ball. Now, can you imagine him in this Mark Pope system? I still think they probably would have recruited Lamont Butler so that Lamont could play on the ball. Reed Sheppard could play on and off the ball. I always thought that was where he was best. Not just setting other people up, but other people helping set him up. So now you have him. Maybe you have Jackson Robinson. Maybe you have Otega Oweh. Maybe you have Kobe Bray. You probably don't have all of them, but Reed Sheppard is actually exactly what Kentucky is missing. What has been my biggest criticism about Kentucky, and if you listen to this show, you already know what I'm going to say. My biggest criticism has been that I just feel like maybe up until the last game or two, I don't know what I'm getting from anybody. I don't know what I'm getting from anybody consistently on any given night. Now, Lamont Butler's great, but he's not always a guy that's going to get you 14, 15 a game. Some nights he's going to get you 6 points and 11 assists. Sometimes he's going to get you 33 points. He's the only consistent to me. Otega Oweh has scored in double figures every game, but he has also had really bad shooting nights. The last loss that they had against Georgia, he scored double figures, but was 3 of 13 shooting from the field. So now you plug in a guy who averaged 13 a game as a freshman in the SEC last year. It just shows you how freaking good this team would be and how good he would be in this system. And I think he's that 12. I think he's that 18, 19 per game guy that potentially puts you in position to get you that every single night where you don't have to wonder, are you going to get it from Kobe Bray? Are you going to get it from Jackson Robinson? Are you going to get it from Lamont Butler? No. He's that guy that gets it to you every single night. So he's perfect for the system. He's the exact guy that they need. And I cannot imagine what he would be like in this system. Listen, we'll never know. It's one of the great what ifs in recent college basketball history. But boy, oh boy, what a fun question that was. Shout out to Ed. He sent that to me like 2 or 3 weeks ago. I've been waiting for the time to bring this up, but it's an incredible one. It is an incredible one. We'll get to a couple more in a minute. Before we do, though, you know who we got to shout out. We got to shout out our friends. We got to shout out our partners. We got to shout out Cauley Puffs and CauleyPuffs.com. Cauley Puffs, I've told you about them for months. It's a new year. You're trying to eat healthy. You're trying to be responsible. You're trying not to put too much crap in your body. Like I said, I'm trying. I made it through 3 or 4 days in January before my dry January ended. Or is it? Yeah, dry January. That's what they call it. So the point I'm trying to make, we're all trying to eat healthy. But when you eat healthy, you also want something delicious. And that is where Cauley Puffs and CauleyPuffs.com comes in, okay? So these are the new age, healthy alternative to the crap in your grocery aisle. You don't want those Fritos. You don't want those Doritos. They make you unhealthy. They make you look like a slob. No, that's what you want, Cauley Puffs. Baked, not fried, avocado oil, no grease. The best part is they taste freaking delicious. I've had so many of you try them, and thank you to those of you who have. And everybody, I haven't had one person yet that's like, you know what, Torres, you told me to try them and they stink. No, it's actually the exact opposite. They are freaking delicious. Here's the thing, though. You don't have to take my word for it. You can try them for yourself. Visit CauleyPuffs.com. That's CauleyPuffs.com. CauleyPuffs.com, CauleyPuffs.com, or you can try them on Amazon as well. Just search Cauley Puffs on Amazon. Try them. You'll like them. Trust me. Thank you to Cauley Puffs. Producer Matt, what other questions we got here? Let's do. I haven't seen everything that people are asking. So, we have any good one? Let's see here. Okay, Mike Jones. So Mike Jones, this is a great standalone segment. We're going to clip off all these as standalone segments. This is a great question. I am so happy that it was asked. Mike Jones says, where's Koa Pete going? So for people who do not know, Koa Pete, and I've told this story a million times, but Koa Pete, first of all, is one of the top unranked high school players in America that has not yet made a college decision. Okay. So class of 2025, he's a senior. And he's regarded, maybe not quite that Cam Boozer, AJ DeBonsa kind of player, but he is a 5-star. And the story that I've told consistently is this. This is what I love about Koa Pete. I remember seeing him after his 8th grade year at the Pangos All-American Camp. Okay, Pangos All-American Camp, Pangos All-American Camp every summer brings together the best guys that are going into their senior year, and they'll have some underclassmen, a couple of juniors, a couple freshmen, whatever. Koa Pete went after his 8th grade year, the year that I saw him. Let's see here. Jalen Duren was there. Jalen Duren is in his 4th year in the NBA, maybe 5th year. I think it's his 4th year in the NBA. He was going into a senior year. Now he reclassified, but you had guys like, you had all sorts of guys there. You had Derek Lively, who's been in the NBA now for a while. Koa Pete was a 8th grader playing against guys that were 4 and 5 years older than him. And I'm not going to say that he was the most dominant player there, but he wasn't afraid. He was competitive. And the thing that I like about him and the thing that I respect about him is that as he's continued to progress throughout his career in high school, it's interesting to me is that he has not missed a beat. Like sometimes these kids get ranked really, really high as 7th, 8th graders, and they kind of just fall off the map or they stop working or they stop developing. That's not who this kid is. He keeps getting better. He's a tough physical kid. I think a lot of people know the backstory. For those who do not, his brother Andrews Pete was a 1st-round pick offensive tackle who at least got drafted by the New Orleans Saints. I don't know if he still plays for them. And then also on top of that, his brother plays football at Arizona State. So this is a player, 6'8" forward, athletic, physical, whatever. Other thing that I like about him, by the way, and we'll get to where I think he's going to college in a minute, can kind of play a lot of different roles. Was dominant on the Adidas circuit during the summer. But he also played Team USA with Cam Boozer. He also played Team USA with AJ DeBonsa, and he played kind of that complimentary, hard-playing, defensive guy, this and that. All right, so let's get to his recruitment, because I actually, he's a Arizona kid, but obviously, he plays a lot in California. And I've asked around about him a lot. One, and I remember saying this over last summer, I think he is going to wait until, I don't want to say the last minute, but he's a smart kid, smart family. They understand how this stuff it goes. And I think he's sitting there saying, why am I going to commit in December or January before I know what the roster looks like. So I think this is a kid that's going to take his recruitment into April. It is worth noting he does have a Final Five. I believe I would have to double check on this, but I know Arizona, Arizona State, is it Texas, Houston, and Baylor, I believe, are the Final Five. I could look this up really quick. But I believe I know it's Arizona and Arizona State, but it's just the question of what are it is those three. So it's Arizona, Arizona State, Baylor, Houston, and Texas. I know he's taken some visits to those Texas schools. I don't really, in my heart of hearts, believe that he is going to any of those two Texas schools. Or those three Texas schools. I do believe that it is ultimately going to come down to Arizona and Arizona State. And I'll be transparent. I don't think a decision has been made and he's just kind of waiting around. I think he is a little bit torn, and I think he is seriously considering both of them. Now, Arizona's the obvious one, so we'll get to them in a minute. Arizona State, a couple things. One, he's from the Tempe, Phoenix area. As I said, his brother is a football player at Arizona State. Might even have a sister. Arizona fans are going to kill me for this. I don't remember all the details, but this by the way, got dropped in the chat. So it's not like I had all this prepped. But he might even have a sister at Arizona State. But, brother that plays football there. His family is not far from the Phoenix area. And I think the other thing that's kind of worth noting on Arizona State, like we kind of know what their roster is going to look a little bit like next year in theory, because Jaden Quaintance, remember that name? We talked about him a lot last April, was a 5-star in the class of 2024, reclassified, playing college basketball right now. He plays really hard. He is only 17 years old. He's not eligible for the NBA draft this year. And so there's a chance Jaden Quaintance comes back and plays college. He's coming back to college basketball. It's just whether he comes back to Arizona or not. So you already have potentially a bedrock NBA type piece on that roster. I also think it's worth noting with Arizona State. There was a big report about NIL, like somebody claimed that they weren't getting paid, or I think there was a report from players didn't say it, but like Bobby Hurley had to address, we're not making the money in NIL that we thought they were, and kids are missing their paychecks. I checked in on that, and somebody told me it was absolutely false, 100% of a lie. And I was actually told it was negative recruiting to try to convince Koa Pete you don't want to go to Arizona State. So one, I think he's smart enough to kind of make sure that all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. But two, I think Arizona State is in the mix. Now, I will say, if you had to ask me today, I do think that probably Arizona is the favorite. And the reason is pretty straightforward. He's an Arizona kid from the state of Arizona. By the way, Tucson, I've made the drive from Tucson to Phoenix. It's not far. Like his family would be an hour up the road. It's not like, they're 3 hours away in the same state. So I don't think the distance thing really matters. And I just think the reality is you're going to be playing with better players at Arizona in a more, just a better system, whatever. And you look at what Arizona has done so far in recruiting. It's early in this class, but they did get a commitment from Bryce James, who's obviously LeBron's youngest son. I don't know if that really moves the needle. But the other thing is they're recruiting some big names outside of him. Braden Burries, 5-star kid from Southern California, another kid who's not committed yet. And I don't even know that there's a leader, but people think Arizona fans think they're a leader. Let me put it this way. On a national level, I don't know that people believe that Braden Burries has a favorite, but Arizona fans think that he is going to Arizona because he has a relationship with Bryce James. Now you have a 5-star point guard in Braden Burries. Now it makes Koa Pete more likely to go. And the one thing about Arizona, credit to Tommy Lloyd, he's always going to have a really good roster. You start to look at what that roster could look like next year. Listen, Jaden Bradley's probably not an NBA player after this year. KJ Lewis, who I love, started slow. We'll see where he is. But there's an opportunity to go to the state school, step in, have an opportunity to play right away and play significant minutes and moments right away. And so this is a 5-star. He's a one-and-done kid. And I think that's the other thing, too. That is one thing I was told in his recruitment early. He wants to go to a place that's going to be able to feature him and get him to the NBA in 1 year. Sometimes you have a 5-star kid that's kind of a fringe NBA prospect. No. This kid's going to be a top 10 pick in the 2026 NBA draft. So he's got to find the right spot. My hunch is it's Arizona. I think it's really an Arizona State type thing. And I still think we're a little ways away, probably about till April before he actually commits. Really quickly, anything else from the chat? We should wrap on that Purdue thing. It's kind of fun. Anything else from the chat, Producer Matt? If there's not, it's okay. Shout out to Aaron Torres Pod. Hit the like button. Shout out to 5 of a Kind Media, who says, shout out to the Aaron Torres Pod. Hit the like button. Yes. By the way, can I just say really quick, we are so close to 50,000 subscribers. We are so freaking close. We're over 49,000. We need to get to 50,000 before the end of this month. We need to get to 50,000 by the end of this month, or I'm going to be really sad. I'm going to be really sad, and we can't have that. All right. Producer Matt, let's wrap on the Purdue thing. I think it'd be pretty fun. By the way, I should have mentioned on the Arizona thing. Yeah, Elijah Arenas. I don't know how I forgot about that. Elijah Arenas, he is the son of Gilbert Arenas. We did a segment on him about 3-4 weeks ago. I think it's either going to be Arenas or Burries, maybe both, that's starting at point guard next year. So to me, that makes the most sense. I can't believe I forgot Elijah Arenas. All right. We should just have a little bit of fun. This is going to be a minute, but I just want to have a little bit of fun with this. So last year, I think everybody remembers Torres had a little bit of a social media back and forth, to say the least, with Purdue fans. And the concept was pretty straightforward. I was just the first person that was willing to call out the ridiculous Zach Edey double standard. The fact that he was taking, in some games, 18, 20, 25 free throws by himself, and the other team, and by the way, that's not hyperbole. Like, there was one game, I think Purdue shot like 42 free throws and he shot like 28, or doesn't matter. I was the first one to call out the nonsense of, how does Purdue have a plus 31 free throw advantage against other good teams? Well, Purdue fans were not happy with that. And Purdue fans said all sorts of mean things about me. And that's okay. You're allowed, fan is short for fanatic. Everyone's allowed to get mad here and there. But I bring it up because I was the bane of Purdue's fans' existences. Now, by the way, Purdue fans, I'll say this. I've gotten a lot of you just think that Zach Edey's tall. Never said I think Zach Edey's tall. I would love for people to actually go back to that segment and see what I said, because I don't think what people think I said is actually what I said. But I became kind of a Purdue hater. By the way, the last aside, by the way, I know I keep saying by the way. I've put this challenge out to every Purdue fan in America, and I will continue to put it out. If you can find, and this segment doesn't count because I'm just setting it up. If you can find me during last season, during the 2023-2024 season, when Zach Edey and Purdue made the national championship game, I'm not talking about when he was a freshman. I'm not talking about when he was high school. If you can find an example of Torres saying that I just believe the only reason he's good is because he's tall, I will give $1,000 to a charity of your choice. I swear to God, right now, I'll do it. If you can find me saying that Zach Edey is only good because he's tall, that has to be the quote, then I will. I said I think he gets an unfair whistle. I said it, but I also said he's a great player. He was my vote for National Player of the Year last year. So that's the edict out to Purdue. First fan that can find that, I'll give $1,000 because I never said it. But anyway, apparently I was going back and forth with Purdue fans last year. And I bring it up because something funny happened over the last couple of days. So Purdue on Wednesday night, they played at Washington. Remember, Washington is now in the Big Ten, kind of this weird, homogenous league, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Well, I bring it up because Purdue ends up coming back to win 69-58, 69-58 at Washington. And a couple Purdue fans took it upon themselves to find an old tweet that I sent to Purdue fans after a game last season. So Purdue last year lost a game. And I said, is there problems? Blah, blah, blah. And Purdue fans said, you're an idiot. And I said, LOL. And this was last year. This was February of 2024. I said, LOL. Wait till Purdue loses to the 17th place Big Ten Washington team at this time next year and come back at me. Basically, they were like, you think my team, you give my team credit. I'm like, I don't think they're that good. Let's see what happens when they lose to 17th place Washington in 2025. Well, I bring it up because they played Washington on Wednesday night. Washington is currently ranked 17th in the Big Ten. And when I tell you Purdue fans, they made sure to let Torres know that, you said this. And while it's kind of cool that you were right about them being in 17th place, you're an idiot because we beat them. So producer Matt pulled a few of the tweets that were sent to me this morning. Gene Katie's burner, who, by the way, has blocked me on Twitter because I wanted to respond to this tweet. He said, it's kind of impressive that you knew Washington would be where Washington would be in the standings, though. That's, of course, after calling me a total idiot, which is fine. I probably deserved it. A couple other ones, and I'll try to find a few as well. Nash Peter says, LOL, you're a parents cover your ears. Nash says, Torres, you're a jackass. So shout out to Nash. My guy, Nash was not very happy with me saying that. Let's see what else I can find. What else do we got here? What were you saying? Says the Twitter account Aaron Torres and Dave Borges hater. By the way, Dave Borges is a UConn beat writer, so I don't know what Dave Borges said to end up in the Torres stratosphere of Purdue hatred. But the Aaron Torres and Dave Borges fan page hater says, what were you saying, Torres? A couple other good ones. Just first of all, Outlaw of College Football, who's just a wild child on Twitter, says Purdue has football. Purdue has fans. Let's see here. Boiler Maid says it's wild they let you talk about basketball. Boiler Sexual says Torres and Kristen Peak are the Bonnie and Clyde of crappy sports takes. First of all, Kristen Peak's great at what she does. She's a recruiting analyst. She's great at what she does. So shout out Kristen Peak, who got dragged into this mess. I don't know how she got dragged into it. I don't know what she said. Phil Madison says you're bad at your job. So that's going on. And then he says, serious question. What is your beef with us? This is from Anthony. We've been one of the best teams in the country the last few years. Our guys are great ambassadors for the sport, and they actually are students. I know you're an SEC UConn shill, but what does that have to do with Purdue? I think that's a great way to end. Never had an issue with Purdue. Never had an issue with Purdue. Where this whole thing starts is I basically said that I think Zach Edey got an unfair advantage from the referees. And if you go back and listen to the segment, it's not what Purdue fans think that it was. All I said was there has been no player in the history of college basketball that was good enough to draw 18 to 20 to 22 fouls on one end of the court and commit 1 to 2 fouls on the other end of the court, which routinely happened. And I don't have all the stats in front of me, but at the time, they played Alabama, top 20 team at the time, top 10 team at the time. They were like plus 18 in free throws. I think they were plus 14 against Alabama. They were plus 18 against Tennessee in the regular season. And so when I did this segment, I said, there's no player in the history of basketball that's good enough to draw 18 to 20 fouls on foul shots and, whatever on one end and commit 0 to 1 on the other end. By the way, that happened in the Elite Eight as well. Zach Edey got called for 1 foul against Tennessee when he two-handed shoved somebody out of bounds. Against Tennessee, again, he was called for 1 foul. Meanwhile, in that game that he goes for 40 points, it was a great game. He shoots 21 foul shots. So he shoots 21 foul shots in that game, 22 foul shots, excuse me. Tennessee shoots 11. I'm sorry. What do you want me to tell you? Listen, it's water under the bridge now. But the point I'm trying to make is that I don't take back anything I said. I have no beef with Purdue. I have no beef with Zach Edey. People think I hate Zach Edey. No. I just think that there's been no player in the history of basketball that's good enough to draw 18 to 20 fouls on one end and 1 to 2 on the other. That player doesn't exist. And people say, oh, it's like Shaq. No, the difference is that people used to intentionally foul Shaq because he couldn't shoot free throws. Zach Edey shot like 78% from the free throw line. So teams were not incentivized to foul him. I thought the refereeing was bad. I think they didn't know what to do with him. But again, you just cannot tell me that there is any player in the history of basketball that is good enough to draw again. Just think about it. Just use common sense. Zach Edey alone, 22 foul shots. Tennessee in an Elite Eight game with 11. Enough said. All right, I'll tell you what. I think it is time for me to get out of here. If you are not subscribed to the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast, please make sure to do so. Make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music, wherever you listen to podcasts, please make sure to subscribe. By the way, to everyone who has given to our fundraiser. Again, a quick reminder here as we wrap. We are working with the Pasadena Humane Society in Southern California. They have had a lot of listen, let me even refresh my thoughts. I want to say this correctly. Reminder is that Pasadena Humane Society, they had to take in hundreds of animals many of them needing medical treatment. It's not just food and water and shelter, it's medical treatment, smoke inhalation, burns, things of that nature. So we are raising funds for the Pasadena Humane Society. We've raised over $1,000. I am appreciative of every single dollar. If you have not considered donating, I would love for you to consider. I think the important thing to remember is two things. One, 100% of proceeds are going to the Humane Society. I take $0. GoFundMe actually takes $0 as well. I'm going to go there with a check for the Humane Society. I'm going to drop off cold, hard cash, right? What did Randy Moss say? Straight cash, homie. That's going to be Torres. Two, I want it to be noted as well. There is no dollar amount that is too small. If you sit there and say, Torres, it's a tough time. I got my mortgage. I got my kids. My kids are in college. My whatever. $5, $10, $15. That does the trick. If you can give more, we're certainly grateful, but I want you to know that you don't have to feel obligated if you can't write some huge check, that it's fine. For more information, again, you can find it pinned to the top of this. We will also have it in the show description, but we appreciate your support, and we do appreciate your support. So we're going to get out of here. By the way, I did enjoy the mailbag segment. So if you want to include any questions for the next mailbag, Aaron Torres podcast questions at gmail.com. Aaron Torres podcast questions at gmail.com. We actually did get a few good ones that I was not able to use today. We'll save them for the next time. I also, by the way, got one from an angry Purdue fan. So that was fun as well. But tell you what, we're going to get out of here. Shout out to Torn Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Reddick, you F-head, unblock me. My thought, we'll see on Sunday. I think we might go early Sunday because the NFL games don't start until I think 3 p.m. Eastern time. So we may go early Sunday. I'll let you know. New episode Sunday, either very early or very late. We'll keep you posted.